Okay. So the other step that I've already done here, and obviously, is to install into my Visual Studio environment the VSIX file, which you can download. It's actually part of the main, that 400 megabyte download, but it's also available as a separate download just for convenience. But it's in both, so you can, if you're downloading the main package of tools, you can always just get that as well. And what that then gives me is the ability to build configurations visually in the Visual Studio environment. So what I'll start from scratch. I've done the install. That's the only pre-step I've done here. I can create a new project. There isn't a specific project template for our classification. So we just use you just use one of the standard ones. It doesn't really matter what you use because it's just a set of files, really. It doesn't. But usually we just use an empty project. An empty .NET project is fine. So just an empty C# project or something. Again, it doesn't mean you're writing any code. It just means that's the template in which you can work with one or more configuration files. So I'm going to choose the empty .NET project here. I will call it something generic like training, and that gives me an almost empty. I've still got this file which I don't really need, so I'm going to just delete it, app.config, just so it's not cluttering up my project. But basically now I've got an empty holder for one or more files, but I just need to create a configuration file. So because I've added, as you'll see here, that VSIX is an extension. So you can see that, and that's really somewhere here, probably maybe at the bottom. Oh, where is it? Oh, installed. There we go. So I look at the installed extension in Visual Studio, you'll see Aluma Extraction Builder. So that's what I've already got installed on this. Because that's installed, if I right click here and say add new item, then it's usually right at the bottom, but amongst all the usual kind of code items you get for Visual C#, you will have an extraction option. So usually it's a question of scrolling right to the bottom. And you'll then get, once you've created that item, you'll see that's the extension is a fpxl extension. That's, if you like, the source file. It's an XML file behind the scenes, but I don't need to worry about that. I can work with this visual environment now to create some extraction logic to, whether it's for invoices or getting data out of medical records or order forms or whatever. I can work with this environment. So the other thing that I would typically do if I was, starting from scratch, I'd create a project like this, and I can have one or more of these files. If I want to maybe have multiple custom extractors, deal with them all under one project, that's fine. I can do that. I'm still going to use Document Studio now, not for configuration, but for testing. So it's also, so I'll get rid of, I'll import some documents first. Okay, so let's say I want to work with these order forms. I'll import them just as I did for classification. Because I've still got it open from before, I'm going to, again, right-click in the top left corner and remove a load of fields, which, because I'm not actually going to do any classification on these are all one type. I'm going to just, kind of get rid of a load of fields, which I'm not interested in. You can see it's actually already got, they've already got some data stored against them. So because some I did earlier, so I'm just going to, I can use, if I go to the extraction menu, if there are results, I can use clear all results. They're just starts with a blank sheet. Because in that folder there were some probably JSON files from when I ran this through earlier as a dry run. But what I now have in Document Studio is a set of files that I want to start configuring a custom extractor for. And at this point, I've just loaded them in. So I've got, typically, therefore, you have these two, at any time, you have these two tools open. You've got Visual Studio here, and I use the shortcut Alt-Tab because I'm going to switch between them quite quickly as I go. So the key concepts are, I'm looking at say one of these documents, and let's say I want to get the date from the document. Perfectly reasonable place to start. So if I want data out of the document, the first thing I'm probably going to create is a field. So a field is basically a placeholder to say I want some data. This is something that's going to come out of the configuration and be delivered back as a result. So it's a placeholder for a result to come out of the configuration. But a field is not going to do anything by itself. It needs some kind of logic assigned to it to deliver me some results. And usually the most basic form of that is some form of search. And this takes the form primarily of a regular expression. Do you all have at least some basic familiarity already with regular expressions? But obviously, if not, there are any number of these are standard sort of pattern matching. So there are all sorts of websites like regex 101 or whatever that you can build and test regular expressions. So we're just using standard ways of matching patterns in text as a baseline concept. So when it comes to something like a date, if I've got a basic familiarity with regular expressions, I might say, well, a date looks like something like, it's got a digit, which is \d, and it has one or two of those, followed by a slash, followed by one or two more digits, followed by a slash, possibly with the century of 20-something, followed by the year, basically. So that's a sort of a basic sort of opening gambit for a date. And now all I need to do is to link my search into the field, because I want to put the results of that search into this field. So for that, I use the black arrow here, provide results, and that allows me to just drag from the search to the field, link the two together, and that's enough to create a basic bit of extraction logic. This needs saving because obviously I've done some work on it, which we can see in the standard way. There's a star here, so I can just use Control-S to save that. And then if I want to test what I've got so far, I can go to my extraction menu. I need to load the configuration that I've just created and point it at that. So I'll just make sure I find the right one, which is here. So this is, I'll just show you all the files that are currently in here. So this is just the Visual Studio project. This is, if you like, the source file. This is the layout that we have on our, so this diagram file reflects how I've laid out my boxes on here. So if you're ever passing these around, it's important that you have at least these two files, the fpxl, which is the sort of the settings, and the diagram, which is the layout. So in other words, if I move this, it's not going to change the settings, but it is going to change the diagram file because I've just decided to move it differently. So if you don't have that diagram file, you will find when you reload it, it will just do some default layout, which if it's a big configuration could be very messy. So it's important you keep both. Every time you save it, this will also be saved. This, if you like, is the compiled version of the settings. It's just a different form of a binary form. It's just a zip file actually, but it's a binary form of the the settings, and that's what I'm typically going to load into Document Studio. And also, if I want to, it's also what I would upload into the Aluma service. So those are the files behind the scenes, but I'm going to, by default, it's just going to ask me to load this. Now I've done that, I can run the configuration I've just created and see that, oh great, I've got the date out of this document just based on the pattern that I provided. I might say also I want to run it on all the documents. But obviously at that point, I'm going to be disappointed because my regular expression was not good enough to deal with the different ways that people insert dates, which obviously typically includes or can include written month names as we have here. So as per the sample you've got, I'm going to somewhat cheat at this point and do so here's one I've got prepared earlier. This needs a more complex form where you've got the ability, a pattern which allows for the fact that the date may be written out, it may be abbreviated, it may be full, and so on. I can improve my regular expression by using something which is aware also of the names of the months. So it's a more generic date matcher. And this again is something we can provide. We've got more sophisticated ones of those. You don't need to start from scratch here. We can provide you with our standard date module, which has all sorts of formats because they can. There's a lot of different variants of dates. So it's not something you need to think about and create from scratch.
And George, do we have that for Spain Spanish?
We do, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that should be close enough for Argentina and Colombia, I think.
I believe, yes, exactly. Yeah. And it's important to know, just from an efficiency point of view, if each time I make a change here, and it's a sort of habit that I have because I kind of work with these quite a lot. If I change something here, as long as I remember to save it here, I do not need to reload my extraction. This will auto update. So other than switching windows to work in here, I don't need to do anything else other than remember to save my configuration. I can just rerun my test samples. And you'll see now that it's picked up without me explicitly reloading it. It knows that there's a new version of the file, so it's reloaded it before running the samples. And you'll see that it's got my better date extraction now. What we may well find now is that, well, okay, that's great. I've got the date, but really I want it in a normalized format. I don't want to have this mixture. I know the people giving me the documents may put it in all sorts of formats, but I want to get it in a standard format at output. So the next thing we could introduce to do that would be what's called a date formatter, which I can add. So this is my toolbox of things that I can work with, and we'll cover as many as we've got time for today, or at least the key ones. So I can add a date formatter, and I just connect it to the date. So this is going to this search is going to get the source values, and the date formatter is going to apply itself. And I just use again this provide results or parameters to link the two up. So I drag from the formatter to the search. And this gives me an ability to basically ask, this search gets results, and then the formatter will modify them into a standard format. The key thing I need to always set on a date formatter is the culture. So if I was dealing with UK dates, I would use a standard 4-letter culture for the UK. And enter that, but I can also use all sorts of standard .NET. There's ways I could custom format this if I wanted to, and there are other settings in here which will deal, for example, with how it deals with two-year dates. Like what does that mean? Is it, when do I mean that that's 2000 versus 1900 or whatever it might be? So there's some more advanced features if necessary, but I won't go through those today. But in a simple case, if I do this and save that, oh, sorry, did I? Use an invalid culture. It should be NGB, not NUK, sorry. Should know my own culture better. I've saved that, and let me rerun these samples one more time. And what you'll see now is that they have been changed automatically to a standard normalized format. Now, the other thing you'll notice here is that this one has actually come up in a different color. What that color means is this is actually a rejected value. So this is saying that this date was not confident. The reason it's not confident is because I told it that I was looking for a UK culture, and this actually was specified in the way that Americans specify it with the what we would see as reversing the date of the month. So it's not a valid UK date. So actually, what I should have done, recognize that these were US format dates. If I rerun now, just show. You should see that this is now going to be confident in because it's got the appropriate culture. On proximity rules, I'm going to apply that first because it's an easier one to. Let's imagine, and there aren't actually, but let's imagine that there are multiple dates on this. So I might say, well, I want the specific date that has the word date near it. So in a simpler case, I'm just going to add, and this is where the power of this sort of technique comes in. You can chain together as many of these things as you want in lots of different ways. I typically call that something different like date text. Give it just the word that I'm looking for, which I don't, doesn't need any special regular expression format, just the word itself, and then use a proximity rule to link the two together. Now, there are two types, and let me just cut over because this is an important sort of concept. There are two types of proximity rules, and in general, two types of ways that you can work with distances in documents. There's something we call geometric, which is where it's about the physical layout on the document. In other words, you're dealing with millimeters or inches or a percentage of the document width or those kind of things. It's about the actual physical layout. But there's also, which is very powerful when it comes to totally unstructured documents, the concept of a logical distance, which is more about how many words are these apart, how many lines are these apart, are they on the same page, those kind of things. And that's well worth knowing, because if you are dealing with unstructured documents, such as legal documents or correspondence or things like that, then this is the right one to use. And it's very powerful because, for example, it means that if you say something needs to be within 3 words, they could actually be on different pages because the text may flow from one page to the next, but it'll deal with that seamlessly. So many other packages don't have this kind of concept, and it makes those fully unstructured documents very difficult to deal with, because you can't deal with things split across lines or things split across pages in any reasonable way. So again, I'll focus mainly on geometric certainly for this type of document. That's what you're going to use, but it's very important to understand that both those concepts exist. So for this, because it's a form, geometric is the right thing to use. I've deliberately put the text here on the diagram. I could have put this search anywhere I like, but the best place to put it is where it is relative to the target. And the reason for that is that when I choose a proximity rule and I drag it again from the search onto the from the text onto the actual target, it will create appropriate default parameters, which I'll talk about in a minute, just based on where I've placed it. Now, if I move it afterwards, it doesn't matter. It's not going to sort of change and confuse me by changing the parameters behind the scenes, but when I first draw this rule, it will try to pick a default value for some of these parameters based on where it was. So it's a convenience, but ultimately you've got full control about, you can change it at will. But as a good practice, it's best to lay these things out as you're seeing them on the document. So this, hopefully, if I've done it right, won't change my results here, because all of these do have the word date next to them. But one thing I can immediately see, and something nice that when you're working with these, if I right click on any result, I can ask for a bit more detail about how it achieves that result. So I say show extraction details. It will highlight not just the target, but it'll highlight the text that it found that led it to include this result. So this is just showing with a different highlighting of that second search that it used as part of the logic. Now, if I deliberately, just to prove the point, if I deliberately change it to some nonsense text which is not on the document, then obviously I won't get a result anymore because it can't find that. I'll put that back. I can always undo in here, just to Control Z works if I want to do something. Wilson, to get to what you were looking at and where you got stuck as quickly as possible, let me add that second field. Let's say I want to get the name. So I'm now looking to get, let's say just for now, the first name from the document. Now, if I create a search, its default regular expression is dot plus. Dot plus means is regular expression lingo for just anything. Dot means any character, and plus means one or more of them. So if I do nothing else and run this, this is going to give, that dot plus search is going to give me the entire text on the document, okay, which is clearly not what I want. You can see that it's highlighting everything and it's giving me everything on the document because that's what I've asked for. Right? But because I don't really know what the pattern for this name should be, it can be any text. I can't really give it a strong regular expression, but what I can do is I can limit the scope of the search. By default, it looks for everything on the document. But what I can do is say, only look for everything, say, within a line or just within one page or a paragraph. But in this case, the right thing to use is a cell. A cell is basically saying a local area within the document. So if I save that with a cell setting, and then we see what impact that has. Now, it's got lots of results, but rather than one big result with everything, it's got lots of little results, which I can get by hovering over here, and you see them all. Or again, I can say show extraction details. It's got multiple individuals. So each individual result is, if you like, a cell. And a cell, like I said, is just any localized area. As soon as there's a big bit of space between things, it breaks the thing into different components or cells. I can also get a bit more about where those are. A very useful tool, particularly when you're dealing with OCR documents, is I've always got the ability of switching to what's called a text view of the document. So while this is the image, this is the OCR results behind the image. And I can also get a level of detail more of actually ask it to show the spaces. So this shows where it's put line breaks in, and also you'll see here, it's showing, this is a symbol showing that that's a cell break, if you like. So that's where the cells are defined in this document. I'll turn it off for now, but it's very useful. Again, if you're wondering why you're not getting results, often obviously it could be an OCR result error, and that will help you find them very, very quickly. So now, if you like, I have got the result I want, but it's just in amongst all sorts of other results, which I definitely don't want. So again, a proximity rule can help me out here. Because the text I'm looking for is below here, I've put my search below, and I'll connect it with a geometric proximity rule. Save that, and I'll say some suitable text, which is this particular form is /first name. And that should hopefully do a better job. So you see now I've got far fewer results, but I've still got more than I wanted. So these, it's actually given me 4 different results now. And the reason for that is all 4 of these are within the proximity that I specified, or the default proximity that it gave me. And so it's given me all 4 of them. It's ordered them, you know, this is the first one on the page, so that's why it's come up as the first one, but you can see it's got, it's come up with all 4. So now I need to fine tune that rule a little bit more, and I can do that by clicking on the rule, on the arrow itself. And this also is where I need to understand where you got to. So this is the region, and there's a few things we need to understand here about the rules. Firstly is the concept of the region that's applied. So when I search for a date or any other text, that's sort of treated as the center relative to these proximity rules, and then the text that I'm looking for is treated as a compass around whatever the target data is. So if I'm looking for text above to confirm that it's this particular date, then I would call that a north rule, and so on round the compass. And obviously in this case, that's why I've got a south rule. But it's important to know it's that way around. So, you know, again, if particularly for left and right, of knowing that it's always relative to the actual target data. So the left, which is the common one, is always is a west rule, not an east, not an east rule. So here I have, because I drew it below, a south rule, and then this is a width times a height that's given here. So the width doesn't have, well, I'll focus on the height because that's what we need to adjust for now. So this is, by default, it's in inches. So, oh, and I think I know the issue that you hit actually. Because we've actually fixed that recently. So you may not have downloaded the very latest version, because we may not have linked to that, which could be that when you try to enter a decimal here, you've got some kind of validation failure. Is that right, Wilson?
Sí, ahí es donde tengo el error. Ahí no me deja colocar el 0.25. Si quieres, I can share my screen.
Yes. It probably said something like, if I do it the other way around, you probably got this, property value is not valid.
Yes.
Yes. So we fixed that because we're actually working with someone else in South America who saw exactly. It's because the workaround, if you want to make it, is because your regional settings are quite naturally set to Argentina. And we had a bug that it was not allowing, it couldn't allow you to put a decimal point, and it also wouldn't allow you to put a comma. So neither value is correct. But I can give you a link to the latest version, which if you just update this, I think should fix that problem. Or in the very short term, if you changed your regional settings on the PC to, you know, an English-based one, it would also work around it. But the other thing you could do to work around it is, because you don't have to use it, you could just say 5 millimeters. So you can use a variety of things, which then obviously just takes away the need to use a decimal point or a decimal, you know, comma, as you've got in your regional settings. But if I take the action to give you an updated link or download link, because we literally fixed it this week, so that's why you probably didn't get the very latest. We just probably didn't get that updated in time for you to get the latest version.
But you can use millimeters, sure. So
yeah, for now, exactly. So, but nevertheless, you'd be stuck. You wouldn't be able to enter a decimal value in any of these, which you definitely will want to in other cases. Okay,
but millimeters is better to us because we use metrical
Exactly.
format.
I mean,
so it's better for us to have millimeters.
We've done it with a, exactly. We've done it with a US.
Okay, perfect. Oh, perfect.
US, so,
We
yeah,
thought that you can only use imperial systems, so it will be better.
Yeah, yeah. No, there are, and
To the point.
so something we're doing, because you do get help if you click on these. You do get a certain amount of help about all these things, but maybe not the detail that you want. For example, to know that you could use millimeters, because you could also use a number of other things. You could say like 10% of the document height, these kind of things. So there's a few options here. We're working right now on the reference material that will give you that. But we do have it already. So if you get stuck and you need that level of detail, we can give you a help file which will give you access to that. But it will also be on the web help, certainly, hopefully within the next 2 or 3 weeks, that you'd be able to go and drill into that kind of like, how should I use this parameter? Because obviously this parameter is relatively complex. But for now, yes, know that you can use millimeters as well. And that should solve the problem. Did I do it? Yes. Okay. So now we've got, yes, the one, that smaller area has meant that I've just got the one result that I really wanted. Because you can play with tables, that is in the sample. Unless you want me to go through that, I might just talk about quickly, at least. I know we've only got 20 minutes left here, so happy to be guided, but there are a few other things that I think it's worth you being aware of. If I go back to my list, the power of the database matching is it not only validates that it's correct, but it actually gives a very sort of powerful way of it works in a fuzzy way, and you don't really need to provide any rules about where on the document those information are. It's basically just going to look across the entire document by default, at least, for that data. So you don't have to say, oh, it's in the top left-hand corner or whatever, which for things like invoices is very powerful. So this is very commonly used for supplier matching on invoices, but it's also used in cases like a sort of mailroom example, where you may have the customer may have a customer database and they're looking to get someone's, they may or may not have quoted, in insurance, they may not have quoted their policy number. So it needs a database match to look up that person's name and address, basically, to actually retrieve the policy number, which sounds like the case you were describing there. So for the sake of speed, I'll just sort of use the same project for a completely different document set. So this is a case where, again, let's clear down the results. I have a database which I've already linked into Visual Studio as a data connection. And this could be an Azure table or anything else, which for these particular documents is a list of names and addresses of lenders that may be there. So that's sort of effectively bank names. So I show you some of the data that's in that database. So this is what the database looks like. It's the name of a bank, it's the address, it's the state and the zip code. So basically a name and address. So a pretty standard sort of format. Obviously this could be anything, and it could be exactly the case you were describing there. If I have that table and I go to my configuration here, I can literally just, again, within Visual Studio, this is my data connection. I can just drag that table onto the configuration, and it will create a matcher with the appropriate fields automatically populated. You see it's picked up from Visual Studio. It's provided the appropriate connection string, which could be local, could be remote, whatever. And I don't, by default at least, I don't need to do much other than to create a field, call it lender, and connect the two. And that will, I don't need to say where this data is or anything like that. This will fuzzily match against that entire database and look for good matches on the entire whole document contents. So if I run one of these, you see here that it's picked up, just with that database, it's picked up the appropriate, it's found a good match on just one item, which is this particular bank, and therefore it's given that as the result. So this is and there's a lot you can do with this, and we could go into, you know, so for example, you could say, obviously, this is just a, you know, a key in the database. So actually, I shouldn't be using that in the match. So I can change parameters like that. I've got a sort of a threshold. This is basically saying that the percentage match of all these has to be at least 70%, but I can fine tune that and say, well, you must get, you know, say at least a 70 or at least an 80% match on the name for it to be confident. So yeah, more than we can go into time now, but the point being that this provides a very powerful way of fuzzily matching against data sources to hopefully that addresses the sort of scenario that you were just talking about. If it's okay, I'll just quickly show, just to give you a flavor, at least one other document type. Which maybe shows some of the other, sorry, that was the wrong document. Okay, this one. Just to clear the results down, I'll get rid of, actually I'll get rid of all of this just to keep it clean. Just quickly, some of the other concepts we can use. So let's say I wanted to get, actually I might put my date back. If I wanted to get information from this document, so I've got a date there at the moment. Maybe I haven't. There we go. Something that we see, actually, okay, there we go. So we've got multiple dates, and again, you could use proximity rules to fine tune which dates you get and so on. But this is something this is a specific case we've addressed in the medical field, where there's a lot of correspondence within someone's file, and it's very useful in a large medical record to be able to know at least what speciality that correspondence relates to. So for example, we might say, well, if we knew that this was a letter from a rheumatologist, then that would be great. That would be useful information, because we could mark this document within the record as relating to rheumatology because it's been written by a rheumatologist. So the sort of thing I may want to do is to show a few things we can do here. I may want to create a dictionary of possible values. Rheumatologist. And I'm going to add as well. So again, this could be a database, but for simplicity, I'm just going to create it as a text file here. What I'm going to show you here now is the use another concept of a dictionary, which I'm going to give it a data file, which is the text file I've just created. And I'm going to put that into a field. And by miracle, I've got all that correct. Oh, there we go. Yep. You see that it's actually come up with, based on that dictionary match, it's come up with 3 possible answers to what the speciality might be here, or the 3 things I put in the dictionary. The reason for showing you this is firstly, obviously, to give you the concept of what that we've got this idea of dictionaries, but probably more importantly, to show how in this sort of completely free format document like a letter, we can work with how do we constrain down to get the right answer. Well, I probably didn't want physiotherapy because that's in the body of the letter. That's just something we talked about. I probably wanted this one because it's in the header of the letter, or this one because it's in the person's signature, because that's actually what indicates the speciality that this is talking about. The more powerful way of doing this anyway is to dynamically say, well, maybe I wanted to find the opening of the letter, which is typically indicated by the word dear, and only look above where I find the word dear. Now, the beauty of that is that's going to, the layout of this letter may change dramatically, but that's a fairly robust rule which will allow me to only look above the opening of the letter. So never find things in the body of the letter which could talk about all sorts of things. So I'm using a regular expression here, and I'm going to change. This is a subtlety, but I'm just going to say must find the word dear, and I must find it strictly at the beginning of a line. And I also have the concept of a area constraint, which is here. So I can, again, by putting this below this dictionary search and drawing now an area constraint up, this is basically saying, or only look above wherever you found this result. This are the key concept, because I think it's something that you will come across uses for this if you're working with these tools, where in addition to these proximity, you can sort of dynamically constrain the area in which you're looking in, again, some quite flexible ways. This is a very simple one. Look for this word, only look above it, and then you only find things in the header. So that's really as much as I wanted to show on that. One of the reasons this works, this toolkit, you've seen some of the power of being able to chain things together and things, but one of the reasons it works very well for things like invoices, where there's a lot of variety in the layout and the logic and so on, is that it's always possible to try multiple methods to get a result. And because what may work on one form or one layout of invoice may not work at all on another one. So you can always sort of layer on more and more ways of doing things, and that, although that creates some complexity, what it does mean is you can, for the most part, you can stick to one, even with a massive variety of layouts and forms and stuff, you can typically create one set of logic that works for an increasingly large number of variety of documents. And evaluators are part of achieving that. So, again, just to continue with the sample, that sometimes the place to look for speciality is in the header of a letter, but you may or may not find it there. And sometimes you may find it in the footer of a letter. So the concept to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of copy my logic. And again, you can use copy and paste in this tool, which is what I just did, to just create a copy here. And I'm going to have 2 goes. I mean, for this document, it works both ways, right? But I'm going to have 2 goes at getting the rheumatologist text out of here. The first is the one we've just seen, that we look for the word dear, we look above that, and we find anything in the dictionary. The second one is I'm going to look for the word yours, which is you know, typically how a letter is signed off, and then look below that, and then again use the same logic of looking in the dictionary for the result. So I'll change this search to be letter closing. Change that to be yours. So now I'll put that into a separate field, but I'll get rid of that in a second, just so we can double check it's okay. Okay, so that's okay, because I copy and pasted it was doing the same. So this, because I didn't, it's what I mentioned earlier, because I copied it, it's kept the same setting it had, which is this is a bottom edge, which means it's defining, it's only looking above it. I could change this to be, I need to change this to be a top edge, which essentially means, or alternatively, I could have just done redraw it from scratch with this above, and you see it creates it as a top edge. And what that means now is that this, yeah, so these are my two efforts to get the same result. One is looking at the top of the letter using that first bit of logic, and this is using the word yours and then looking below that to get the one in the signature. In general, they may not both work, and I might say, well, I'll try the header approach first, and if that works, I'll take it, and if not, I'll try this fallback approach of looking down here. And that's where the concept of evaluators comes in. So if I've got approach 1 and approach 2 to getting the same data, and I only want to use them in, you know, in sort of priority order. So for that, I can use, I've got multiple evaluators here. There's various things that will say, you know, you can look for results closest to the top of the document, closest to the bottom of the document, there are various things like that. But this one allows me to put in, choose first, allows me to put in multiple techniques. And it will go through them in the order that I've defined, and only use the ones that the first one that gave some results, and then it won't even bother to execute this one, which is an efficiency thing. So, you know, because these, you know, these could be quite complex. So it'll literally just go down the order, and it essentially means it allows you to encode things like, try this first. If that fails, try this. If that fails, try this. If that fails, try this. And this is something, again, with something like invoice processing, is very powerful, because there isn't just one way to get an invoice number out of a document. It can be in all sorts of different ways, in all sorts of different formats. And there's an obvious way to get it first, which works maybe, you know, 70% of the time, and then there's some other few ways which work 20% of the time, and you can therefore just stack all of these approaches together using this concept of evaluators. So what this should mean here is that now it's tried this and it's got a result, so therefore it didn't bother to look at the other one, just got a single result. If I just drag this to change the order, actually I should give slightly more descriptive names for these. I think I can move this. Yeah. Okay, if I wanted to change the priority order of that, say actually try the bottom approach first, then you would see that that would now give me this one. And it's, again, it's got a result, so it hasn't bothered to look up here. So anyway, that's the concept of evaluators. Again, I thought it was important enough to at least cover in outline. And there's as I said, there's a number of those. All of these things in the toolbox are different forms of evaluators. But choose first is one of the most common ones to use. Good. I think that covers everything that I wanted to touch on for this session.